significant. So there's a positive and negative reinforcement. So it's the adding and subtracting. We use food because food is very, very, very valuable to them. It is considered a primary reinforcement. It is something that does not need to be conditioned. They like it, they need it. In fact, things they need to survive, they need food, air, water, sleep to survive. They can live in a stall, never move, never be touched, never have the light of day. They won't thrive, but they can exist without all of those things. But they cannot exist without food, air, water, sleep. And to survive as a species, they need to procreate. So those 5 things are pretty hardwired in them as reinforcers. So think about a baby horse. The moment it's born, what does it do? It gets air. Comes out and it gets air, ideally. Or we need to help it. But it gets air. And then usually within a couple hours, it's up and it's nursing. And so that now it's getting food and water. Usually a couple hours after that, it's taking a nap. So now in its first hours of life, it's got all of those things they need to survive. Nobody had to teach them how to do that. They were hardwired for that. And it's because they need those things to survive. Because they're hardwired to find food, it makes food a very, very, very powerful reinforcer. To the point, how many people have heard never hand feed a horse? I mean, we've all heard that, yeah. And you know, all that does is it shows me how powerful food is. Because people can hand feed them a few times and they have this habit, this new behavior that they never bargained for. But it's because every single time we feed our horses, we're reinforcing something. Every single time. So think about that. Every single time someone feeds your horse, you're reinforcing something. And this is where I think that old adage of never hand feed a horse comes from, because they would hand feed things and not realizing the correlation between what I just fed is now going to be increased in frequency. So the horse is at the stall reaching over the fence reaching over, and people feed them and people feed them. Well, the horse, we don't know what they're thinking, but they're probably thinking, go get that food. So they're reaching as best they can. We have a physical barrier. And then we take that physical barrier away. Well, now they're all over us because they, in their mind, were thinking, go get that food. And so we unintentionally can be feeding those things. Going to a big barn and watching horses being fed in a 100-stall barn. People just go down the row and feed them. There's all kinds of things going on. You know, there's pawing, there's this, there's that. And those horses oftentimes think, this is why I'm getting fed. There's a woman that I had Minty, and my horses were really good about, any other horse got fed. It did not matter. It wasn't about them. And so you would go places, and that would be great. And then Minty went to a boarding kind of facility because I was traveling so much. It was later on in life, and he had been on his own for a little bit in between there. And the woman at the barn said, oh, he paused, so I'd be sure to feed him first. Okay, he'll never do that again, I'm sure. You know, so her having best intentions, you know, was unintentionally reinforcing him for a behavior that is undesirable. You watch big big barns, and they just willy-nilly, they're reinforcing behavior right and left. So a lot of times when people are told you cannot hand feed a horse, it's because unintentionally they've learned some habits that they have created, and now they're having poor behavior, undesired behavior being associated with the feeding. So, and there's been horses that have been quite aggressive. I told you there's horses that want to maim humans, and I mean that came way before me, you know, but I have that have been biters, and I've addressed it all with hand feeding. So it's not the hand feeding, it's the timing of our hand feeding. It's the awareness of what we're feeding that is actually the catalyst there. So the more we can be aware of what we're feeding, the more that we can change that around. So hand feeding can be used to undo things, but if it's careless or thoughtless or unaware hand feeding, we can create some habits that we do not want to see. So it's all to say that food is a very powerful reinforcer. So understanding that is quite helpful.